If you had told me 1 year ago that my own family would be the ones to break me and then hand me the fuel to destroy everything they built, I would have laughed. Or maybe I would have cried. I'm not sure anymore, but I know exactly when the shift happened, and I know exactly when the revenge began. My name is Caroline Mae Turner. I'm 30 years old, born and raised in a small suburb outside Charlotte, North Carolina. The youngest of 3 children. The quiet one. The agreeable one. The one who never caused trouble, never challenged decisions, never took more than my share at Thanksgiving dinner. And as I would learn, the easiest one to erase. The night everything cracked felt ordinary at first. My parents' lakefront house shimmered with early autumn light, the kind that filters gold through the trees as if blessing the world before the darkness rolls in. My mother, elegant as ever, moved from the kitchen to the dining table with a quiet authority that made everyone instinctively sit up straighter. My father poured wine, deep red, bold, unnecessarily expensive, a symbol of everything they valued. My brother Matthew sat at one end of the table, legs crossed at the ankle, already talking about a promotion he was expecting at the family construction firm. My sister Evelyn, 10 years older than me, had just been named CFO of the same company. They were the heirs, the chosen ones. My parents said it openly, said it often, said it proudly. And then there was me. The daughter whose little graphic design business was treated like a hobby despite pulling in 6 figures the previous year. The daughter whose intelligence was praised only when it didn't overshadow the brilliance of her siblings. The daughter who was expected to clap the loudest for everyone else. But that night something felt different. The air too tight, the looks too rehearsed, the silence between conversations too deliberate. And then, with the grace of a woman who believed the world bent at her command, my mother folded her linen napkin and looked directly at me. "We updated the will," she said. My fork froze midair. Matthew and Evelyn exchanged a glance, a smug, satisfied little exchange that told me everything before a single word was spoken. My father took a slow sip of wine. "It's time we formalize the succession of the company and the estate. It only makes sense that what your grandparents built stays with the children who actually contribute to it." I felt heat crawl up my neck. Matthew leaned forward. "Caroline, it's nothing personal," which always means it's entirely personal. Evelyn cleared her throat. "The lake house, the firm, the investment accounts, they're all being divided between Matthew and me. You'll receive a small trust, enough to keep you comfortable." A small trust. Comfortable. As if they were talking about a distant relative instead of their youngest daughter. My mother added, "You've chosen a creative path. We support that. But the business legacy, well, that belongs to your siblings, it's just logical." Logical. Logical while my hands built the company's first brand identity at 16. Logical when I designed the marketing campaigns that saved their contracts during the recession. Logical when my ideas brought clients they never would have reached. But because I'd chosen to work for myself instead of under their roof, I was disposable. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice even. "So you're excluding me." A pause. A brief, sharp inhale of discomfort. And then, "It's for the best," my mother said. Something snapped inside me, a small, quiet fracture that didn't show on my face but split something deep within. I smiled because that's what they trained me to do. I nodded because that's what kept peace in the Turner family. But inside my chest, something dark and cold began to bloom. They didn't know it yet, but they'd made a mistake, a devastating one, because the one they underestimated is the one who knows all their secrets. And I already knew the first domino I'd knocked down. The next morning, the world felt wrong. Like a painting slightly crooked or a familiar road with one sign missing. I kept replaying their words in my head, excluded, logical, comfortable, each one slicing deeper until I couldn't tell whether I was numb or furious. People romanticize family drama. They call it complicated, textured, a test of loyalty. But betrayal from a parent, there's nothing textured about it. It's a clean, deep wound. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call my mother demanding answers. Instead, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank screen of my design software. My hands wouldn't move. My mind refused to quiet. That was when I remembered something small, something from years ago, something they never expected me to keep. My grandfather once trusted me with a hard drive. I was 19. He handed it to me in his quiet workshop behind the lake house. His voice was soft, tired. Caroline, one day you'll need this. They won't protect you the way you protect them. At the time, I didn't understand. I thought he'd been rambling, slipping a bit in his old age. I tucked the drive inside a box of my college things and never opened it again. Until now, my pulse hammered as I dug through my closet, ripping open old storage bins until I found the faded cardboard box labeled school stuff. The hard drive was still there, black, unmarked, old-fashioned. My breath hitched as I plugged it in. A folder blinked onto my screen. Turner Company Legal, Turner Company Accounting, Turner Family Personal. My stomach twisted. I clicked the personal folder first. Inside were scanned letters, handwritten notes, and my breath caught one document labeled Addendum to Will, signed and notarized. My heart pounded as I opened it. It was a version of my grandparents' will, a version my parents never mentioned. A version that stated explicitly that their estate and all holdings were to be divided equally among all grandchildren, regardless of career path or marital status. All grandchildren, including me. And then I saw the date 3 months before my grandmother died, meaning my parents had altered the distribution afterward, quietly, strategically, illegally. A cold shock spread through me. They didn't exclude me because I didn't contribute. They excluded me because they didn't think I'd ever fight back. But the real punch came when I opened the accounting folder. Inside were spreadsheets, detailed, time-stamped, showing irregularities in company funds. Large withdrawals labeled facility renovations and equipment updates that didn't match publicly filed statements. One withdrawal stood out: nearly $500,000 moved to an offshore account under a shell corporation. The signatures on the approval sheet: Matthew's, Evelyn's, and my father's. A tremor went through me. They weren't just greedy, they were vulnerable, exposed. My grandfather didn't give me this drive by accident. He knew something. He suspected what they would become without him. And he gave the quiet child, the ignored one, the power to destroy everything. A laugh escaped me. It sounded nothing like me. They thought they could cut me out of the will. They thought I'd accept scraps while they inherited millions. They thought I was weak. But weakness is just strength in disguise, waiting for a trigger. And they had finally pulled mine. When I closed my laptop, my hands weren't shaking anymore. For the first time that day, my mind was clear. I knew exactly what I was going to do. And I knew it would start with the person they trusted most, my sister. Because Evelyn Turner had skeletons, expensive ones. To understand my sister, you'd have to understand the Turner family hierarchy. Matthew was the golden boy, the heir, the future CEO. But Evelyn was the enforcer, the master manipulator, the one who played peacemaker and executioner with the same serene smile. She held the company's finances in her perfectly manicured hands, and everyone, clients, contractors, even my parents, trusted her implicitly. But I knew something she didn't think I remembered. 3 years ago, during a 4th of July family party, I had borrowed her phone by accident. We had matching phone cases back then, blue with little gold flecks. Hers buzzed on the counter, and without thinking I picked it up, assuming it was mine. A message flashed on the screen before I realized the mistake. It was a confirmation of a wire transfer. Not from the company, from her personal account, to a private treatment center in Arizona. A center known for handling gambling addiction. I had forgotten about it, until I saw those accounting files on my grandfather's drive. Now, sitting in my apartment with the weight of my family's betrayal burned into my bones, I knew exactly where to start. My plan wasn't impulsive, it was surgical. Step 1, verify the addiction. Step 2, trace the money. Step 3, expose the fraud and let the board bury her. Not legally illegal yet, but enough to ruin her standing. Enough to make the Turner empire wobble. I started by searching public records for the treatment center. Then, with a gentle nudge to one of my clients, a cybersecurity expert who adored the branding work I'd done for him, I slipped in a request. Hypothetically, I said over coffee, how would someone confirm a wire transfer without accessing personal bank accounts? He laughed. Hypothetically easy. Routing numbers leave footprints. Give me a name and a date range. I did. 3 days later, he called me. Caroline, I don't know what your sister's mixed up in, but she's been paying off debts. Not just gambling, casinos, private tables, high stakes. A slow, dangerous calm spread through me. He continued. And some of the transfers, they overlap with the dates you mentioned from the company's accounts. Meaning she wasn't just gambling, she was stealing. I thanked him, hung up, and sat quietly for a long time. Then I drafted my first email. Not to my family, to the Turner Company's board of directors. A simple note, a single attachment, a question. Did you authorize these financial transfers made under CFO Evelyn Turner's signature? No accusation, no threats, just a spotlight aimed directly at a secret she thought she buried. Less than an hour after I hit send, my phone buzzed. It was Evelyn. 3 missed calls, then a text. We need to talk, now. I stared at her message, feeling the first true surge of power in my adult life. For the first time, she wasn't the one controlling the narrative. For the first time, she wasn't the one holding the family together. For the first time, she was afraid of me. I typed a single reply. I'm busy. Then I turned off my phone. Because this was only the beginning. And the next move, that would be the one none of them would see coming. After Evelyn's curt message, I did exactly what they expected me not to do. I waited. I let the silence become its own instrument. Power, I had learned, is often quieter than panic. Instead of answering, I opened a new document and started to plan with the ruthless calm of someone who knows their opponent's moves before they make them. Revenge isn't a moment, it's a map. I drew routes and exits, risk and payoff, emotional landmines and legal safe zones. I would not be crude, I would be surgical. My first call was to Marcus, my cybersecurity friend, who owed me nothing and gave me everything anyway. He met me at a coffee shop downtown, the kind with exposed brick and too strong espresso. He grinned when I slid into the booth like I had the world's best secret. What's the play? He asked, stirring his coffee. I explained, a careful drip of truth, not an all-at-once scream that could be dismissed as vindictive. A leak here, a question there, enough to make the board start asking inconvenient questions. I wanted them off-balance, small gusts that would become a storm. Marcus nodded slowly. We can set up a series of anonymous emails to the board attachments with corroborating documents, financial trails, receipts from the treatment center, casino transaction records tied to Evelyn's cards. Make it tasteful, Caroline. No theatrics. Tasteful. The word felt strange on my tongue, but it was right. I wanted them to fold, not to riot. While Marcus worked, I dug deeper into Evelyn's history. I found something else, an old loan she'd co-signed for a boutique renovation in an upscale part of the city. The boutique failed and the loan defaulted. Who absorbed that loss? The Turner Company, through a consulting contract that my father's firm had conveniently signed with the boutique's shell company. Minnie Hook, a small, careless note in the contract's footnote. A name. My father's initials. It was a breadcrumb. I followed it. I reached out to an investigative journalist I'd once met at a gallery opening. Her name was Harper. She liked complicated stories, especially ones that smelled like hypocrisy. I sent her a neutral professional note. I have documents that suggest misappropriation of company funds. No accusation, just records. If you're interested, I can bring you a sample. She responded within 24 hours. Bring it. I don't publish unless I can verify, but I'll look. Meanwhile, at home, I curated my own public image. Not because I wanted attention, but because public perception matters, especially in a town like ours, where reputations are currency. I invited a small group of friends to a design showroom opening I was hosting the following week. It was low-key, tasteful, and absolute theater. Word of it reached my mother through the neighborhood grapevine. I made sure of it. On the day Marcus sent the first anonymous package to the board, I watched the clock with an impatience that felt absurd. Then, the first tremor came. A terse email from the chairman to Evelyn asking for clarification. A private message from a junior accountant, frightened and vague. A whispered meeting between my parents in the conservatory when I went to pick up my niece for a weekend visit. I watched them with the detached interest of a scientist observing a specimen. Evelyn called me that evening, voice thin. Caroline, whatever you sent, stop it. Whoever's doing this, stop. This is a mistake. That night, I walked around the block 3 times, letting the cool air steady my hands. My plan was working, but plans always attract anomalies. Human things like guilt, fear, and desperate retaliation. And then the retaliation came, but not in the form I expected. My father, who had always been a gentle storm, sent me an invitation to lunch the next day. I almost declined. I didn't. I wanted to see his face, the man who had taught me how to lay bricks in the backyard as a teenager, the man whose mild hand had never once hit me, but had cracked my ribs with indifference for years. At lunch, he looked older, smaller. He cleared his throat. Caroline, we need to talk. The conversation started soft, small talk about my business, about clients. Then he leaned forward, eyes searching mine. Are you involved in what's been circulating? I tasted iron. No. He pursed his lips. You don't understand how the company works. Some things are complicated. I let the silence sit like a live wire between us. You excluded me from the will, Papa, I said, finally the sentence a stone I threw. His face crumpled for a moment, more from surprise than shame. We thought it was best. For whom, I asked. The question was simple. He had no good answer. He sighed, then did something I had never seen him do. He apologized in a way that begged for absolution and also begged to be believed. We were trying to protect the company. Protect from what? From truth, from their own greed, from the very children they chose to favor. I left lunch with more questions than I'd gone in with. The board's emails grew sharper. Evelyn's messages turned to threats. My parents' bluster turned brittle. The tide I had started was rising, and with it my sense of inevitability. That night, Marcus called with a new piece of information. They're trying to trace the leaks. They're coming closer. We need to move faster. I closed my eyes and pictured the will document on my hard drive, the notarized addendum, my grandfather's handwriting. I thought of his voice telling me one autumn afternoon, you must protect yourself. They had tried to erase me. Now I had to choose whether to return the favor, and I chose to escalate. If you set a forest on fire, the first flames appear small, insignificant. They lick a leaf, then a branch. Nobody notices at first, but in dry weather, in the right wind, it becomes unstoppable. My first public blow wasn't a press conference. It was a quiet letter delivered to the company's external auditor with copies to a local business reporter and selected board members. Marcus had redacted anything that could legally expose me. I wasn't a vigilante. I was an informed whistleblower. The letter listed discrepancies, included scanned signatures, and posed simple questions. No accusations, only a request for an independent audit. The company's response was predictable denial, internal review, a paltry statement about investigating the matter. But the board members' faces at the next meeting were not the same as before. Too many of them read the letter with a tremor at the eye's corner. Then Harper published a 2-page piece in the city paper. She was restrained, professional, and devastating. She quoted anonymous sources, referenced corporate documents, asked blunt questions. The headline was a modest one, Financial Concerns Raised at Turner Construction. It wasn't a headline that screamed ruin. It was a headline that invited curiosity, and curiosity, in a small, covetous town, is contagious. The first calls came to our home at dawn. My mother's voice on the voicemail was tightly controlled. Caroline, come over. We need to discuss this, she said. Then Evelyn's voicemail, clipped and sharp. What did you do? And then the most dangerous call, a voice I had not expected, Matthew's. Sis, he said, we need to talk face to face. Tonight. Matthew had always been the ladylike golden sun, calculated charm, and teeth that glinted like knives. He suggested coffee, then said, don't bring drama. I prepared myself anyway. That evening in a downtown cafe, he arrived late, breathless. He sat down opposite me and smiled in a practiced way. This is getting messy, he said. Minnie Hook, his fingers tapped a rhythm on the tabletop, a nervous repeating pattern I suddenly recognized from childhood, the way he used to drum when packing up fishing gear, anxiety hid in his habit. I know you sent the information, he said, suddenly bluntness like a blade. This is not something we can ignore. So now you're the moral compass, I asked. My voice was cool. I wanted to provoke him, to see his mask tremble. He laughed softly. No, but you don't understand the consequences. Consequences for whom, I asked. For the company that steals from its investors. For the families who put their life savings into our projects. His expression shifted, and for a fraction of a second, I saw something like fear. We grew up in this company, Caroline. We built it with Dad. You weren't here. You mean you took credit when I designed projects that brought in new contracts, I said. The words were precise. His jaw tightened. He leaned forward. If this goes public, our clients pull out. The firm collapses. You do realize that, don't you? Families who depend on us will lose jobs. I felt my stomach twist. It was an old argument used to shame me into playing small, but the difference now was that I knew their misdeeds. I knew the thefts tied to offshore accounts, the manipulations of contracts. The moral high ground he offered smelled like desperation. Then do the honorable thing, I said quietly. Return the money, fix it. His laugh was hollow. You don't get it. Fixing it would mean admitting it. You don't just fix that. I watched him weigh his options. The man across from me was not the only villain. He was a frightened boy in a man's body, someone who'd been raised to protect appearances at any cost. He thought he had leverage because he attacked in public while protecting the firm, but leverage can shift with a single decisive move. I left the cafe with a new resolve. If the company collapsed, I would shoulder the consequences. I had already paid a price for being true to myself. I would not mortgage my truth for their comfort. Back at my apartment, Marcus buzzed with more news. Harper's story got picked up by a broader outlet. The board's legal counsel has contacted several journalists, trying to contain the narrative. Evelyn is publicly denying everything, but internally they're panicking. Panic is instructive. People make mistakes in panic, and mistakes leave trails. I slept poorly that night. In the half-wake hours, I pictured my grandfather's hands, rough, patient, secretive, slipping me the hard drive. He must have known. He must have seen what their future looked like. He had armed me with a map and walked away to let time do its work. The next morning, a new email landed in my inbox, an anonymous tip to the state regulator. Someone had reported potential embezzlement and misappropriation of funds. The regulator acknowledged receipt. An investigation could be slow. It could be destructive. I felt a weight lift, partly relief, partly fear. The gears I had set in motion were turning. The family's reaction was no longer private, it was public. Their choices were being examined under a light they'd worked years to avoid. And then, as I sat back in my chair, savoring the small victory, my phone buzzed with a single unexpected message, a photograph. A black and white image of the old workshop behind the lake house, taken from an angle that meant someone had gone through trunks, boxes, memories. It was captioned with 2 words, "We know." My stomach dropped. Someone else was watching me. When someone tells you they know, it carries the pressure of judgment. It can be an ally, it can be a threat, it can be both. The photograph of the workshop arrived at 9 in the morning. No sender name, no number, just the image and the words, "We know." My first thought was that my grandfather had left more than one map. My second thought was darker, that someone else in the family, someone I had not suspected, was also collecting evidence. Or worse, someone outside the family who had been watching the entire drama like a hawk circling prey. I called Marcus immediately. "Trace it," I said. "Find metadata, IP addresses, anything." He obliged. "It's anonymous, but not impossible. Whoever sent it is careful." Whoever they were, they had access to the lake house or someone who did. That meant either a family member, a neighbor, a distant cousin, or a cleaner who had become suspicious. I thought of the older woman who came every other week to dust and water the orchids, Mrs. Green, with her slow smile and purse full of coupons. She was a neighbor, not family. She'd been at the house 3 times last month. Had she seen boxes moved? Had she noticed me carrying a hard drive into my trunk when I'd borrowed something from the attic as a teenager? I went to the lake house the following day under the pretense of returning a family album. The house smelled of lemon oil and old wood. My parents greeted me with guarded warmth phrases like, "We're just so worried, and we need family," slipping out like practiced lines from a play. Their eyes, however, were stormy. I wandered into the workshop alone. Sunlight fell through dusty windows, catching on tools and a scattering of oil-stained rags. I ran my fingertips over the workbench where my grandfather had once taught me to sand a board until it was smooth. I stood exactly where he'd stood and listened to the silence. And then I found a small envelope tucked behind an old toolbox, the kind of place someone might hide loose nails. My name was on it in my grandfather's careful script. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small key. The sheet read, "Caroline, trust no one completely, not even those who look most like family. If you are reading this, you are ready. GT." My breath hitched as memories flooded his hands, the smell of varnish, the late-night mutterings about greedy men. The key was old brass and strangely warm in my palm, though it had been hidden for who knew how long. What did it open? My heart raced with possibility and dread. Mini hook tucked inside the workbench drawer beneath a false bottom, I found a ledger, thin bound and marked with a name I did not expect. A name that shifted everything. The ledger was not corporate. It was personal. It detailed payments, cash withdrawals, envelopes handed to someone on Sunday afternoons at the dock. The handwriting was shaky at times, deliberate at others. Names were abbreviated initials used for discretion. And there in the middle of a page was my father's signature. Not the neat signature he used on public documents. This one was hurried, small, guilt-burdened. Next to it, initials E.T. and M.T. Evelyn and Matthew's initials. My hands went cold. My grandfather had been documenting the family's private ledger for years, then hidden it where only someone who knew the house well would find it. He had built unknowingly an insurance policy for the quiet child. I snapped a picture with my phone, hands steady now, though my chest thudded. If the earlier documents had been fuel, this ledger was a match. As I drove away from the lake house, a thought settled in me that I hadn't expected. My family hadn't only stolen from investors and funneled money offshore. They had been siphoning from the very heart of what my grandfather had built, tiny, cruel thefts disguised as generosity and accounting adjustments. When I got home, I immediately uploaded the images to a secure cloud and sent a note to Harper, new documents more serious than before. She replied with one word, "Come." We met in a dim corner of an upscale bar late enough that the room hummed with low voices and jazz. Harper leaned over a small stack of photocopies. "This ledger changes everything," she said. "This is personal embezzlement. If we run this, it's not just the company on trial. It's a family." "Yes," I said, "that's the point." She studied me for a long moment, then asked the question I knew was coming. "Why are you doing this, Caroline? Why risk everything?" I almost laughed. "Because they erased me. Because they thought a small trust and a kind word would patch over a lifetime of dismissal. Because my grandfather trusted me and left me the map. Because somebody must tell the truth." She nodded once, then added, "You should be careful. When families fall, they fall hard." I left the bar with a resolve that felt both fragile and ironclad. I thought about the anonymous photograph we know and the ledger tucked behind the toolbox. Someone was watching me, but I was also holding a weapon that could not be unseen. Over the next few days, the pressure mounted. Evelyn made a desperate public plea at a shareholders' meeting, promising transparency and reform. My parents made statements about family unity. The board hired an external auditor. The regulator acknowledged my complaint and said it would review documents. But behind the formal steps, clause came out. My mother called me in tears one night, voice raw. "Caroline, please. We've lost clients. Matthew is under scrutiny. We made mistakes. Help us." Part of me wanted to step forward. Part of me still loved the idea of family. Then I remembered the dining room table, the napkin folded like a noose around my throat, the casual cruelty of the words they'd used. "You'll receive a small trust." I thought of the ledger. I thought of my grandfather's handwriting. I thought of the key tucked behind the toolbox. And I made my choice. That choice came in the form of another anonymous email, this one to the regulator, the local paper, and the auditor. Attached were clear, clean photocopies of the ledger, the offshore transfers, and the addendum to the will. No names beyond initials, but enough to spark an inquiry. I hit send with shaking fingers. Then I waited. That night I sat on my balcony looking out at the city lights, feeling like a stranger in my own life. The wind was sharp and clean. It felt like the first night after a storm when the air is different and the world seems to have rearranged itself. At 2 in the morning I received a text, a single line, no sender name. "You were right to be careful." Below it, a photograph of my sister's passport, a boarding pass stub, and a note reading, "She's leaving tomorrow. Don't let her." My hands tightened around my phone. Someone else was in this game now. Someone with their own motives. Someone who had been watching family storms for a long time. Someone who knew where the bodies were buried and who wanted me to act. I looked at the language in the text and felt the direction that the game had taken. This was no longer about exposing wrongdoing for justice's sake. It was about timing, about control. The question now was not whether I could take them down. It was whether I could do it on my terms. At dawn, with the house still blue and quiet, I made one more call. Not to Marcus, not to Harper. To a woman I had met once at a design symposium, a lawyer who specialized in corporate whistleblower cases and had a reputation for moving like a shark in calm water. Her voice was steady and efficient. "If you bring everything to me, we make sure it's done right." I exhaled a long, sharp breath. "Bring it," I said. And as I hung up, another thought slid into my mind like a shadow, someone who watches, does not always protect. Sometimes they wait for the perfect moment to pull the cord. I had the evidence, I had the ledger, I had my grandfather's key and the hard drive that had set the whole thing in motion, but I did not yet know who the watcher was. And in a story like this that is the most dangerous unknown of all. The lawyer's name was Amanda Worth. Sharp mind, sharper instincts, the kind of woman who could sit through a hurricane without a single hair moving. When I arrived at her office, a minimalist space overlooking uptown, she motioned me to sit and folded her hands. Walk me through everything, she said. So I did. The will, the accounting irregularities, the offshore transfers, the ledger, the anonymous text, the photograph of the workshop, my sister's addiction and stolen funds, my father's involvement, my mother's denials, my brother's empty warnings, the mounting pressure, the slow collapse of a family pretending nothing was wrong. Amanda listened without interruption, not a single flicker breaking her composure. When I finished, she exhaled once and leaned back. "You're sitting on dynamite," she said. "Good. But you've made one mistake." My stomach tightened. "You underestimated how quickly a collapsing family will turn to violence, emotional, financial, reputational when threatened. Meaning, she said evenly, that your sister attempting to leave the state tomorrow is not a coincidence. If she gets ahead of this, if she shifts assets or destroys records or misplaces signatures, you lose the advantage. They'll rewrite history." I clenched my fists. I won't let her disappear. Amanda nodded. "Good. But you need to understand something, Caroline. Your family believes money is power. Control is power. Silence is power. But documentation, real documentation, is the one thing they can't erase." She slid a business card toward me. "Find out what that key opens. Bring it to me. That key matters." My fingers brushed the brass as if it could answer questions by touch alone. After leaving Amanda's office, I drove straight to the lake house. I waited until my parents left for an appointment. My mother in a trench coat, my father walking stiffly beside her. When the driveway emptied, I slipped inside with the same key that had been sitting on my nightstand, like a whisper from the past. The workshop door creaked open. Dust drifted in the sunlight. My heart hammered. What did my grandfather want me to find? I searched behind shelves under floorboards. I examined the walls for hidden panels. Nothing. I was about to give up when I noticed a knot in one of the wooden beams. Not a natural knot, this one had faint scoring around it. Mini hook, I pressed it lightly and the wood shifted. A hidden drawer slid out. Inside was a small metal box locked. I tried the brass key, it fit perfectly. The lock clicked. I opened the lid and gasped. Inside were a stack of photographs, a thumb drive, a sealed letter addressed to the grandchild who needs this most. I unfolded the letter with trembling hands. "Caroline, if your mother or father are reading this, then I have failed. If Matthew or Evelyn are reading this, then you must stop them. If you are reading this, my quiet one, my watcher, then the truth has found its rightful home. They will try to hide what they have done. They will rewrite memory, but they cannot rewrite proof. Inside the box is everything they hoped would stay buried. Use it wisely. Use it only when the time comes. Your grandfather, George Turner." My throat tightened. I opened the stack of photographs and froze. They were photos of my father meeting with a man whose face I recognized from local scandal stories years ago. A man tied to fraudulent contracting schemes. A man once arrested for bribery. Photographs spanning years, dates, locations, handwritten notes on the back: paid, deposit, transfer complete. I dug further. The thumb drive contained a folder labeled Turner Company, False Contracts. My vision blurred. 4 points hit me at once. 1, my family had committed more than financial mismanagement. 2, they had falsified entire contracts. 3, my grandfather had spent his final years gathering proof. 4, he had chosen me as the guardian of the truth. For the first time since the betrayal at the dinner table, emotion rose in me. Not anger, not vengeance, but grief. A grief so heavy I had to sit down. He had seen what my parents would become. He had done what he could to protect me. And he trusted me to finish the job he started. I closed the box, locked it again, and tucked it beneath my coat. When I walked out of the workshop, I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. The watcher who sent me the anonymous text might not have been an enemy. They might be someone following my grandfather's trail, but I wouldn't know until I confronted them. And confrontation was coming, because tomorrow Evelyn would try to flee, and I wasn't going to let her. I barely slept that night. The ledger, the photos, the thumb drive, the letter, they circled in my mind like vultures, tracing the same pattern over and over. At 6 the next morning, I drove to the airport. Charlotte Douglas was its usual mess lines, snaking out of security travelers half awake, rolling their suitcases across tile floors. I parked in a corner of the garage where I could see the elevators clearly. I didn't have to wait long. At 7:19, my sister stepped out of an Uber, sleek as a magazine, spread dark glasses, designer coat luggage that probably cost more than my car. She moved briskly, head down the way guilty people walk when they're hoping no one recognizes them. I followed at a distance. She went straight to the check-in kiosk. Destination Chicago, one-way ticket. Of course, Chicago had always been her escape, her weekend conferences, her gambling trips, her secrets buried under city lights. I approached quietly and stood behind her. Running away, I asked. She stiffened, turned slowly, and removed her sunglasses. Caroline, she said, smiling with no warmth at all. What are you doing here? Stopping you. She laughed softly. Sweetheart, you can't stop me from taking a trip. You have no authority over my life. You're fleeing an investigation, I said calmly. Multiple investigations, actually. Financial, ethical, legal. And I think you know that if you leave right now, it'll look a lot like guilt. Her jaw flicked the faintest crack in her mask. You're overreacting. None of this will stick, she said. You're destroying our family for nothing. Nothing, I asked. The stolen funds, the false contracts, the offshore accounts, the altered will. That seems like more than nothing. Her eyes widened. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do, I said, because Grandpa left the truth with me. For the first time, true fear crossed her face. She glanced around, then leaned in so close I could feel her perfume. Where is it? She whispered harshly. Where is the file? You'll never see it, I said. Her composure shattered. You don't know what you're doing, Caroline. This will ruin us. No, I corrected. You already ruined us. I'm just turning on the lights. She stepped back. Her hand trembled slightly on her suitcase handle. If you walk away now, if you let me leave, I can fix this. I can make sure you get something from the estate. I laughed. There it is, the consolation prize. Her face reddened. You think you're the hero, she whispered. You're a traitor. You're nothing, and you always will be. I stepped forward until we were nearly nose to nose. If I were nothing, I said softly, you wouldn't be trying so desperately to stop me. For a moment I thought she might strike me. Then an announcement echoed overhead, final boarding call for Flight 87 to Chicago. Her eyes flicked to the gate. Calculation flashed through her expression, greed fighting fear. You can't keep me here, she said. No, I agreed. But the state regulator can, and the board can, and the auditors can, and the attorney general can. Her breath caught. I pulled a folded paper from my coat, an order temporarily restricting her travel during an active financial review. Amanda had filed it at dawn. I held it out. She stared at it with shaking hands. Then she crumpled. For the first time in my life, my sister, my elegant, untouchable sister, slumped onto a bench and cried silently into her hands. People stared. Phones lifted, cameras clicked. Once I would have felt pity. But pity is a luxury you give to people who didn't try to erase you. I turned and walked away. Behind me, security officers approached her. The first explosion had hit, and the world had finally seen her crack. When a company collapses, it doesn't do so all at once. It crumbles in quiet spaces, first boardrooms, hallways, whispered calls, sudden resignations. And then one day, the front doors open, and everything is different. That morning, the Turner Company headquarters felt like a hive struck with a stone. Employees standing in clusters, phones ringing, shredders humming, actual paper being carried in frantic stacks from one office to another, panic in motion. I walked into the lobby just as the board announced a temporary shutdown pending investigation. Chairs scraped, gasps spread, someone cursed, someone else whispered, we knew something was wrong. My parents were already inside the conference room. My mother stood rigid, hands clasped, as if prayer might reverse the world. My father sat, shoulders slumped forward, eyes empty, like a man finally seeing the cost of the life he built. When they noticed me, my mother's expression darkened. What did you do? She hissed. Nothing you didn't already do to yourselves. You've destroyed us, she whispered. No, I said. You destroyed yourselves by choosing greed over integrity. You cut me out of the will, and that was cruel. But this was criminal. My father raised his head, voice cracking. Caroline, this will ruin our name. Everything we built. You didn't build it, I said quietly. Grandpa did. And you stole from him while pretending to honor his legacy. Silence fell. Board members entered. Lawyers followed. The air grew thick. And then the chairman, Mr. Leary, a stern man with silver hair, addressed my parents. We have reviewed initial evidence provided by independent auditors and the state regulator, he said. The discrepancies are significant. We are recommending full removal of both CFO Evelyn Turner and Vice President Matthew Turner from any company duties effective immediately. My mother gasped. You can't. This is a misunderstanding. No, Diane, he said gently. It's documented. And Marcus Turner, he said, turning to my father, has been placed on administrative leave pending further review. My father closed his eyes. And the chairman continued, we've received a legal addendum from Mr. George Turner's personal estate. It contradicts the current will. My mother went pale. That document is invalid. We updated the will. The chairman looked at her with tired patience. Ma'am, the notarization predates your revision. Legally, his addendum stands unless proven otherwise. A ripple of shock moved through the room. The chairman turned to me. We were informed that you were in possession of the original documents. My mother whispered, Caroline, don't. I looked at her, this woman who had always valued appearance over truth, control over love. Then I pulled the envelope from my purse and placed it on the table. There was a long, quiet moment. A moment where the Turner family legacy shifted hands. A moment my mother realized she had lost the one thing she prized most, authority. My father broke the silence, his voice barely audible. Caroline. You would do this to your own family. I felt something inside me finally irreversibly settle. You stopped being my family the moment you decided I didn't belong. The room exhaled half pity, half awe. The board moved swiftly after that. Lawyers collected documents. Auditors spread out. My mother tried to speak again, but her voice dissolved into tight, breathless sobs. She tried to hide behind a tissue. Matthew stormed out. Evelyn didn't show up, reportedly still at home under travel restrictions. My father sat motionless, staring at the table as if the wood itself accused him. When I stepped out of the conference room, the employees looked at me differently, not with fear, but with something like recognition. The girl they'd ignored, the sister they'd dismissed, the daughter they'd excluded. Now the woman who held the truth they needed. As I walked toward the elevator, my phone buzzed. A text from the unknown number. Good, now finish it. Below it, another image, this time of a storage facility, Unit 24. A place I'd never been. A place my grandfather had never mentioned. A new door, a new secret, a new chapter in a story still unfolding. Whoever the watcher was, they weren't done with me. And I wasn't done with my family. The address in the anonymous text led me to a storage facility on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where people hide things they don't want found, old furniture, old regrets, old sins they hope time will erase. The sky hung low and gray as I parked in front of Unit 24, my breath fogging in the chilly air. I hesitated with the key in my hand. The brass felt heavier than it should, like it carried expectation or warning. Someone wanted me here. Someone wanted me to see something. But who and why now? I slid the key into the lock. It clicked. The metal door groaned open with a long, echoing scrape, revealing darkness. I stepped inside. The air smelled like cardboard dust and old tobacco, the lingering ghosts of my grandfather's pipe. I flicked on the light. My heart stuttered. The unit wasn't filled with junk. It was filled with boxes, dozens of them stacked neatly on shelves, each labeled in my grandfather's handwriting. Turner Company. Original. Turner Company. Duplicates Turner Estate. Personal Turner Estate. Confidential Turner. 1990s Turner. 2000s. Turner. Private agreements. Turner. To be opened by Caroline. My breath hitched. He hadn't left me one box. He had left me an archive. An entire history of my family's corruption, meticulously catalogued by the man who had built their empire and then watched it rot beneath his children's hands. I walked deeper inside, touching box after box, as if greeting ghosts. This wasn't just evidence. This was motive. This was intent. This was a legacy designed for one purpose: to protect the descendant who would one day be cast aside. Me. But why had the Watcher led me here? Why now? That was when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned sharply, pulse spiking, but the entrance was empty. Only silence and the soft hum of fluorescent lighting. Then my phone buzzed. A new text from the unknown number? Do not let them rewrite the past. The truth is here. Take what you need. I typed back a single word, who? No answer. I steadied myself and opened the top box labeled Turner, to be opened by Caroline. Inside were handwritten notes, a journal, and a sealed envelope that matched the one from the workshop, my name in careful script. I opened the journal first. Its pages were filled with stories, real stories, my grandfather's accounts of his fears, suspicions, disappointments. One entry made my hands go cold. Matthew lied today. Said money was missing from the project fund. Evelyn covered for him. Marcus approved it without question. They think I don't see what they're doing, but Caroline the girl sees everything. She is the quiet truth in a house full of noise. I swallowed hard. Another entry. If they ever turn on her, if they ever forget who built this, she must inherit the truth. Not the money. The truth. A truth heavy enough to level their empire and cleanse it. But then I reached the final envelope. Inside was a letter. Caroline, if you are reading this, then the family has broken the one promise I begged them to keep. They have chosen power over love, money over loyalty, control over kindness. You cannot save them, you can only save yourself. What you do next will define our name, not theirs. I trust you to carry this weight. I trust you to choose wisely. Whatever you decide, I am with you. Grandpa! A trembling breath escaped me. This was no longer about revenge. This was about righting a wrong that had been rotting for decades. I packaged the most damning documents: false contracts, bank records, photo evidence, internal memos, and placed them in a waterproof case I found on one of the shelves. But as I stepped out of the unit, a figure moved at the far end of the corridor. Tall, still, watching. My muscles tightened. Who are you? I called. The figure froze, then turned and walked away. Not hurried, not guilty, just watching. As the person disappeared around the corner, another text pinged. Do not fear me, fear them. My pulse raced. The watcher wasn't my enemy, not yet. But my family, they were about to become very dangerous. Chapter 11, The Final Confrontation. 2 days after the storage unit, the Turner Company officially collapsed. The board released a statement citing financial misconduct, falsified contracts, and actions inconsistent with ethical corporate standards. My parents' names weren't printed, but everyone in town knew. Charlotte's small business community whispered like a congregation on Judgment Day. Neighbors who once envied my mother's garden parties now looked away. Clients who once toasted my father's deals now muttered about betrayal, and throughout all of it, I said nothing. But my silence didn't last. On Sunday morning, my parents called a family meeting. No invitation, no courtesy, just a text. Come to the house, now. I debated ignoring it, but this needed to end. When I arrived, the lake house was eerily quiet. The curtains drawn, the air heavy. My parents sat at the dining table, the same table where they'd told me I'd receive a small trust, their faces carved with exhaustion. Evelyn was there, too pale and shaken. Matthew arrived last, jaw-clenched bitterness radiating off him like heat. My mother spoke first. Caroline, she whispered, you've punished us enough. Punished. As if the truth were an act of violence. My father cleared his throat. The company is gone. Our reputation is destroyed. We could go to prison. Whose fault is that? I asked softly. Matthew slammed his fist onto the table. Yours? I didn't flinch. Really, I falsified the contracts. I stole company funds. I altered the will. I used offshore accounts. He swallowed, face twisting. I leaned forward. You did this, not me. Evelyn's eyes brimmed. Caroline, please. Dad is sick. Mom can't handle. Don't, I said sharply. Do not weaponize your weakness after years of weaponizing your power. My mother trembled. We are family. No, I said. Family protects. Family honors. Family lifts each other. You use that word to control me, not to love me. My father's voice broke. Your grandfather loved you so much, but you destroyed everything he built. He built truth, I said. You destroyed that. I simply revealed it. Silence fell. Then my mother whispered the words that sealed their fate. What will it take for you to stop? My breath stilled. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask for understanding. She asked for terms. You think this is a negotiation? I asked. A deal, a transaction. She blinked rapidly. We're desperate. I know, I said, but desperation isn't redemption. And then I set the final stone. The state attorney general will move forward. The regulators already have the documents. The journalists have interviews scheduled. You can't stop what's coming, and I won't help you hide anymore. My father stood abruptly, chest heaving. You are no daughter of mine. I held his gaze. That was true long before today. And that's when it happened. From the hallway, a soft knock echoed. Everyone turned. The door opened and an officer stepped inside. "Marcus Turner?" he asked. My father stiffened. "You're under arrest for financial fraud and falsification of corporate documents." The room erupted. My mother sobbed. Matthew shouted. Evelyn collapsed into a chair. My father looked at me with wild, desperate eyes. "You did this," he whispered. I shook my head. "No, you did." As they placed handcuffs on his wrists, he sagged like the wind had been punched out of him. My mother lunged toward me. "You're a monster!" I stepped back. "No, I'm the truth you tried to bury." And then, behind me outside, leaning against a tree at the edge of the property, the watcher stood. A tall silhouette in a dark jacket, hands in pockets, observing the fall of the Turner dynasty with chilling stillness. When our eyes met, the figure disappeared into the trees, leaving one final text on my phone. "It's almost over. Finish it." The months that followed were a blur of hearings, indictments, interviews, and depositions. Turner Construction dissolved. Assets were seized. My father accepted a plea deal. Evelyn cooperated with investigators in exchange for reduced charges. Matthew tried to flee but was stopped at the airport. Irony isn't subtle when karma writes the script. My mother retreated from society, entirely unable to bear the stares or the gossip. The lake house went into foreclosure. The estate based on my grandfather's original will was frozen for redistribution after legal review. And me, I rebuilt. I spent my mornings designing again, hands steady for the first time in years. I slept in a downtown condo I bought with my own earnings, sunlight pouring through windows, clean and warm. I met Amanda weekly, planning my testimony. I met Harper occasionally, giving updates on the story she now called the Turner truth. The world finally saw me not as the quiet girl, not as the spare daughter, but as a woman who refused to vanish. But the unanswered question remained: who was the watcher? They had threaded themselves through my journey, nudging me, warning me, guiding me with the precision of someone who knew the truth before I uncovered it. Then one afternoon, as I packed boxes of evidence for the Attorney General's team, a knock came at my door. I opened it and froze. There, standing in the hallway, was a man in his late 40s. Familiar eyes, a gentle sadness in his expression. "Caroline?" he asked softly. "Yes, I'm Daniel," he said, "George's son." My heart slammed into my ribs. "My grandfather didn't have another son," I whispered. He nodded. "He did, but he wasn't allowed to acknowledge me. My mother was someone your grandmother despised. They forced him to keep me hidden. And when I grew up, he left me one task: protect you." My knees weakened. He continued quietly. "I'm the watcher. I followed your family's downfall for years. I saw when they turned against you. I saw when you needed help. I sent the texts. I led you to the storage unit. I did what he asked of me." Emotion surged up my throat. "Why me?" I whispered. His expression softened. "Because you were the only one who saw him, not the businessman, not the legacy, but the man. He loved you, and he knew the others would betray everything he built." Tears slipped down my cheeks. "What happens now?" I asked. He smiled gently. "Now you live, and you choose what to build from the ashes." I exhaled a long, trembling breath. Something inside me, something bruised and quiet, finally loosened. I stepped onto the balcony that evening, looking out over the city as the sun dipped behind the skyline. The air smelled like rain and new beginnings. My story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. It was about rebirth. It was about reclaiming the name they tried to steal. I lifted my phone and recorded a message for my viewers. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, cut out, or cast aside, this story is for you. Justice doesn't always come quickly, and it doesn't always come quietly, but it comes. And when it does, you don't have to scream. You just have to stand your ground and let the truth speak. I paused. And if you want to hear how this all unfolded, hit like, comment your story, and subscribe. Because sometimes the quietest girl in the room becomes the strongest woman in the story. I ended the recording and let the silence settle. For the first time, the Turner legacy wasn't a burden. It was mine.